So this scenario happens in which you bring so much hope. It's something that I think entrepreneurs have. It's like you get all these defeats, rejections, whatever it is, but then you quickly repair. What I remember from those times is that these things will happen, but then another opportunity will come, and I will go all in with all my optimism, energy, excitement, always thinking this is it, and another similar thing will happen. So those kind of rejections, I think, are very normal, but it's not just a rejection. It's that you've worked really hard to be in front of that person. You prepare really well, and then you have this, call it conviction, this sentiment that this is going to work. Like you go there as if the only possible outcome was we're going to have a great partnership deal. This is going to change everything. And then you go home with just a big rejection. That happened to me lots of times, and I'm sure that it's something that lots of founders can relate to in their own corner. But yes, I think rejection is the name of the game. At least it was for me.
Papaya! Hello all and welcome to another episode of Transform Your Future with me, Eddie Isin, where I sit down with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and high achievers as they identify areas I can improve on and guide me to further my self-improvement practice. For more information and insights, join my newsletter at transformyourfuture.com, where I write about reinvention, personal growth, and entrepreneurship. If you like the show, you'll love the content on my site. We want to hear from you. Let us know how we can improve your listening and viewing experience. Suggest upcoming topics or a great guest you know for the show. Please reach out to us through our website, your podcast app, comment, or just text me directly at 813-722-1417. We want to hear from you. Today, we have a conversation that dives deep into the heart of entrepreneurship, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. Our guest is Ricardo Jiminez, an entrepreneur whose journey through failure, resilience, and self-discovery is as insightful as it is motivating. In this episode, Ricardo shares the story behind his book, Crash Course, a candid exploration of his experience founding a company that did not succeed. But this isn't just a tale of business gone wrong. It's a tribute to every entrepreneur out there who has put their heart and soul into an idea only to face the harsh realities of the startup world. Ricardo opens up about the emotional toll of entrepreneurship, the importance of aligning your vision with reality, and the lessons he learned along the way. He also shares how a personal health scare led him on a profound spiritual journey, changing the way he approaches life and business. Whether you're an inspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or someone navigating the challenges of life, this episode is packed with wisdom and inspiration. So let's dive in and discover the deeper side of entrepreneurship with Ricardo Jimenez. Ricardo, welcome to Transform Your Future. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Eddie. Thank you very much for having me in your show.
Yes.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Very busy. I'm back to a very high level of activity out there, leveling up every day. So I'm doing really good. My secret is I just started moving, and just keep moving, and it just keeps the energy flowing as long as I keep sticking to the movement.
Cool. Let's get the energy flowing. Well, let's all at the same time sit down, relax,
yes. Yeah, and I'm very excited. To talk to you because most people don't focus their books on failure, right? Most people don't focus that way. They focus the opposite way. So I'm very interested in diving in. So let's go ahead, and I want you to just open up and tell me a little bit about your journey to write and publish Crash Course.
Yes. So good word, failure. But I guess the book is about failure, about a company that failed that I started. But I think more than anything is about the entrepreneur, the founder. I've always read many books about business, many books about startups, books that will tell you how to pitch a company, how to do guerrilla marketing, how to hire your first 50 employees, but they wouldn't talk about the person who had to do all those things, the person who had to build the company. So yes, it's a book about failure because my company failed, but beyond that, it's a book that's a tribute to everybody that's starting a company, whether they fail or not, because it shows understanding towards the founder. It shows hopefully some inspiration, understanding, and hopefully some tools as well.
So what got you, what was it that was going on that got you to put the pen to paper or type or whatever to actually start telling this story? What was going on with you that got you to do that?
Yeah. So I had this company. I had this company in Austin, in Texas, for 6 years. I tried to make it happen, and then in that time, I met lots of entrepreneurs. And after the following years, I met more entrepreneurs, and very often it was entrepreneurs that were struggling, entrepreneurs that really believed in their idea, but the world didn't seem to respond to their hopes, their dreams, their emotional investment. And I could see that lots of founders related to what I was sharing in terms of how hard it was for me and how I had this idea to write a book sharing my story, the story of a company that did not succeed. The one thing that has been an insight, a very late insight, which just came a couple of weeks ago, is that not only I've realized that founders who did not succeed can relate to the story, but even the ones that succeeded, I feel like they're even more hungry to tell how hard it was for them, how much they've earned their success, and talking about the success itself. So I think starting a company is really hard. And even a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, I saw the NVIDIA CEO saying that if he hadn't known how hard it was going to be to build his company, he wouldn't have done it. So even the most successful people, or maybe even more so, they've gone through this path that's really, 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 really challenging. And I don't think that's told enough, and I don't think that's understood enough. That was one of my main drivers to write this book. One, to share my story, because like an artist, sometimes I feel like I want to express and share, but the other part was with the hope that it will bring some understanding of the role of the founder, but also self-understanding to the entrepreneur, that if they're not moving as fast as they thought, if they are not feeling the winner they thought they were going to be, if they're not meeting the milestones of their business plans as they expected, that's part of the game as well. And these are things that you don't think about when you start, because you just, or at least in my case, I was very milestone driven. I would just go to the next thing, go to the next thing, go to the next thing. And when the next thing became sales, that's when I wasn't able to meet my milestones. And that's when the confusion, the disappointment, and a lot of stories happened that I talk a lot more.
Give me an example of one of the stories from the book. And maybe around the challenges with sales and sales milestones.
I'll share one. There's many stories in the book, but there was a toy company in Austin where I lived, and lots of my friends would tell me, my friends with kids, would be all my toys, my products. So the name of my company was called Plushies. And we did toys in the shape of countries. Then the other day, for fun, I Googled it, and you can see you can see our toys, and you can see me there on Google. But some of my friends told me that I had to go to this store in Austin, and I went there many times. I asked for a meeting with the buyer, who happened to be the owner of the store. She would not, we got the response from the people facing the customers. They would tell me, we will talk to her. And then after years, they came back to me. So I thought, finally, I got the meeting that I've been waiting for all this time. So I went with my toys in the bag. I met her. And when I was going to take my toys out of the bag and tell her the story of the company and what we're doing, she told me, I don't need to see them. I said, what do you mean you don't need to see them? She said, yeah, look at the website. They are too branded and they are too colorful. I'm not interested. Yes. So this scenario happens in which you bring so much hope. It's something that I think entrepreneurs have. It's like you get all these defeats, rejections, whatever it is, but then you quickly repair. What I remember from those times is that these things will happen, but then another opportunity will come, and I will go all in with all my optimism, energy, excitement, always thinking this is it, and another similar thing will happen. So those kind of rejections, I think, are very normal, but it's not just a rejection. It's that you've worked really hard to be in front of that person. You prepare really well, and then you have this, call it conviction, this sentiment that this is going to work. Like you go there as if the only possible outcome was we're going to have a great partnership deal. This is going to change everything. And then you go home with just a big rejection. That happened to me lots of times. And I'm sure that it's something that lots of founders can relate to in their own corner. But yes, I think rejection is the name of the game. At least it was for me.
Yeah. Well, as an entrepreneur and as somebody who eats, sleeps, and drinks sales every day, who's all about, sales and influence and communication, absolutely, I identify with what you're talking about, getting kicked in the nuts. You get kicked in the nuts, kicked in the nuts, kicked in the nuts, and every time you got to get back up and try again. But, it's interesting. Chet Holmes, in his book, The Ultimate Sales Warrior, he talks about having a dream 100 list. Like if you just had these 100 clients, it would set up everything for you, to win. And then, you're going to work your butt off to try to get into those 100 people. But then if you're don't have a sales background. So now as an entrepreneur, now I got to figure out how to do sales. I got to figure out how to do that good job with that or something else. If you're trying to set up stuff, with the internet or doing advertising, like, entrepreneurs have this thing, like I have to learn everything. And so it's really difficult and challenging. And, I'm at the place now where when I do things like, I don't want to be involved in all that. Like, I don't want to do that. There's a whole bunch of things like I don't want to be involved in. I want to be involved in this over here because that's something like I can do. That's my specialty. But these things over here, that's not my forte. So let's find somebody else to do that who knows how to do that. But then even then, like, getting people involved to do things, it's not so easy, right? It's not like you could just easily say, hey, I'm looking for an expert in this field to come work for me. And they're just going to show up at your door, right? Like, you have to go through another process for that. And then you have to figure out how to hire people and how to interview them and how to win. So it's a lot. It's a lot into being an entrepreneur. And I think you're right that most entrepreneurs, they get an idea, they have a vision, they get excited about it, they have a can-do attitude, and then they're totally the reality of what it really takes to go and pound the pavement every day and go out there and build it and get crushed and crushed and crushed. They don't take that into consideration, really.
Yeah. And sometimes for me, I felt that I lived in continuous ambiguity. Towards the later chapters, I talk a lot about that because I went to another toy store and they really loved what we were doing, and they put our toys in one of the displays. But then I would go back to see how sales were going, and they would tell me, "No, we barely haven't sold any." And then I would realize, and again, you start learning, and then you hear that kids mostly want what they either have seen on TV or what their friends want. Mm-hmm. And I would think, well, this is really challenging. I really don't have the budget to be on TV. So then you think about working with schools. You try, how I felt is I tried working with international schools, working with gift shops, brands related to travel with toys. And we had maybe some very small sales, very small successes, but not big. But it was always I felt everything was always very inconclusive. That just because I hadn't been able to make something work, it didn't mean that the potential or the avenue was not still there for maybe someone, or maybe for a company with more budget, or for someone who could do things better. And I also realized that when I would talk for someone for half an hour, 40 minutes, and I would tell them about the story, the messages that we wanted to bring to kids, this inspiration, this awakening kids to the world. Very often, parents will buy our toys and they will be very excited and we will get great reviews, but it wasn't sustainable there for me to speak for an hour to sell a couple of toys. When I try to bring systems or a platform or something that would speak for me, that's the part that I wasn't able to do it.
Interesting. So through this process, though, and I understand this from talking to you and communicating back and forth to you. So I do understand, Ricardo, that through this process you actually learned a lot, right? There was a lot of things that you learned from it. What are some of the things that you personally learned that helped you to improve yourself as a human being, as somebody? Because I mean, you talk about, for example, how to get the baggage and the emotions out of you, and turn into your body, in your life for answers. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, for example?
Sure. There are lots of ways to take this, so I'll take it one way, and then we can go back to the question and answer it in a couple of different ways. One thing that I think it's coming with me for my whole life is not having predefined responses about how we need to respond in a certain situation. For instance, when you're an entrepreneur, we all know that conviction, grit, perseverance is the name of the game. We need to overcome challenges and we need to overcome challenges. But at the same time, at one point, we need to be listening to reality. And it's very hard to find the right balance or to have a good foot on this is the dream, the vision that I'm going to be working for, fighting for. And at the same time, I need to understand the messages that I am getting from the world. I committed, and at one point I realized that the world didn't seem to be embracing our product. But it was hard for me because I think entrepreneurs fall in love with their idea, and we fall in love with an idea, and we think that this could work. And it's like, sometimes it's like a relationship in which we fall in love. Yes, we are arguing all the time, but when we are good together, it's so great when we are good together. But 90% of the time, we are not great together, but we fall into this idea that we could be so well together, but we're not well together. So we fall in with this idea that this could work. And at some point, I felt that very early, I feel like this is my company and I'm going to do whatever it takes, even though I need to spend my whole life. I will stay my whole life to make this happen. And then many years later, I realized that it wasn't so much the idea may work or may not work. It was not working for me. And then I realized that there was a cost of opportunity for me. There were other things that I could be doing that would bring me more joy than just not moving forward with my project. So this comes to the idea of this. We need to have an intention. We need to have a mission, but we shouldn't go blindly through life. And I'll talk about emotions as well. A few years after I closed my company, I did a 6-month meditation retreat in Uruguay with the Isin system. And there's many components of the system, but the two main ones are, one is we repeat these sentences called assets that are based in unity, gratitude, love, and appreciation, usually with the attention in our heart. And our body starts vibrating in the frequency of these sentences. And as the body starts, I don't know if I'm being a little woo-woo, but this is how I understand it. So
it's good.
This is how I'll share it. As our body starts vibrating in these higher frequencies, the old memories or old emotions that have been stuck in our bodies, slowly they start coming out. And when they come out, they can do it in any way, very often in the forms of emotions. We work with 4 main emotions: sadness, anger, joy, and fear. We express all of these emotions in different ways. But a big part of the system is to let go all those emotions that are the ones that keep us stuck in the past, all these memories. And it's very incredible, and it's something very hard to imagine when you're doing this meditation and suddenly a memory from 20, 25 years ago pops up or bubbles up, and something that you hadn't thought about in many, many years. It's like if it was an air balloon at the bottom of the ocean that suddenly goes to the surface. So all these memories that have been buried in our bodies, everything starts coming out. And again, usually it happens in the form of emotion. So we need to be able to move these emotions, and with the main goal to be free from that. And as we let go of emotions, memories, then it's easier for us to be in the present, which is what all spiritual teachers talk about, but we don't really know what to do. Well, the freer we are from past baggage, the easier it is to really be in the here and now, enjoying life and everything that comes with that, which is trusting, joy, openness, and building into this idea of trust. I think it's also easier either to move forward or to commit to something or change directions when you're trusting that your life is much more than a startup. Yes, you're an entrepreneur, you're a founder, you did everything you could for your company, but a big challenge or a big trap that founders have is to identify with their company and identify their success, their value to the success of their company. And I think that just makes it easier to commit, because you feel this needs to go, because otherwise I'm not going to be happy or people are going to see me like a failure. And yes, it can give you the extra boost of motivation, but at the same time, that traps you in a narrow way of understanding who you are, because you are so much more than your company. And this clarity, I think it's key to start choosing things that are good for you, regardless of how good they are for your company, to see yourself that you are so much more than your company, that you're not just a means for your company to succeed. I know I've touched a couple of things there.
Yeah,
I'm not sure where we want to go from here.
You said a lot. You said a lot. I'm thinking about, for example, early as an entrepreneur, I got involved in a lot of different businesses. I had this business, and then whatever, maybe things didn't work out, or I had a partner, and then me and the partner didn't work out anymore. So I went and did something else. And, I did a lot of different things. But when I got to that point in my life, where I wanted to really make my mark, I wanted to really go all in and figure things out, I went for my dreams and my passions. I went to my passion and my dreams of what I wanted to do, which happened to be filmmaking and, producing and directing and writing for film and television. And I went and did that. And while I was doing it, I realized like there was all these challenges, like we're talking about, that happens when you're an entrepreneur. And, I try to overcome those challenges. And eventually, I started to realize that I have to change. Like you're talking about, I needed to look at me. I need to look at what I was doing. Why was I responding that way? Why did I feel that way? Why did the other person respond? Was that me, that they were responding that way because of something I did, or is it their shit? And as I went through that, I went through this period for a few years where I was annoyed. I was annoyed that I had to keep changing. I had to keep looking at myself, but everything. And then it became everything in my life was that way. My marriage, my kids, my health, everything it all came back to me. I have to take care of it. I have to do something about it. I have to figure it out. Right. But eventually, you kind of accept that. And then, that's the process, which is why I do transform your future, which is why I talk about all these things, because I feel like, you have to really work on yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally, and you really have to have a feedback loop, and some kind of way to develop a direction, whether that's a mentor, that you get a mentor who's done it before, been there before, maybe even the same industry, who can help guide you to, to get there, to hit those, benchmarks, or, just using your own intuition and, your own God, higher power, whatever it is, through your own meditation practice or whatever, to try to find what the answer is. And a lot of times we don't like the answers. We don't like the answers a lot of times. Like, you need to change your business completely, sell something else or whatever, and we don't like that because we were stuck in some other idea. So, It is definitely a process, and you need to have that feedback loop. And sometimes it's very challenging, like we're talking about. But I
Yeah.
certainly identify that I've gotten more. I've moved further in my businesses when I focus more on me and what I'm doing, and sticking to the things that I know I'm good at, and not doing the things I'm not good at. And really making those hard decisions. I mean, one of my favorite books was The Hard Thing About Hard Things by the Anderson Horowitz. You know, because first of all, I love the title, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, right? That's why they're hard things, because they're hard. They're not easy to do. But we got to do them if we want to get ahead. So,
Yeah,
so now,
I'll share,
yeah,
yeah,
please.
I'll share a couple of things. So when things don't, when people around us or when things don't go our way, we don't have too many options, and we can either leave a situation, we can surrender to the situation and accept it, or we can change. Those are pretty much our options. If we want a different outcome, we can always try to change other people. That's only likely only going to lead to suffering.
Yeah, I like to say, Ricardo, I like to say you have three options, right? You can accept it exactly where it is and just accept that this is it. You can try to fix, manage, and control it, or you can just remove it from your life. And, you know, sometimes that's really the best option, but we don't want to do that.
Yeah, we don't want to change. But the one beautiful thing about change, and this is one of my biggest insights in this meditation retreat, is that as we were doing these meditations and we learned to be a little bit more in the present, and I know this is something that everybody talks about, but I think usually living in the present is understood as what's the word? What's the expression? Like living as if it was like living in a park, as if there was no tomorrow. Like YOLOing.
Living in the present.
But there's something deeper than just having fun or doing whatever I want. But where I'm going, as you really start living in the present, then you start having a capacity to choose. Before something would happen to you, and then or to me, and then I would respond in a way that was in a way that wasn't conscious, in a program. So I wasn't responding. My program was responding. And what happens when you start to be a little bit more tuned in and a little bit more present is that you get the trigger, but instead of responding like you always do, let's say that you tell me something that I feel it's inappropriate, and then my usual response would be to insult you. Well, now that I'm a little bit more present, I can choose to either insult you, which is what I always do. I can choose to leave the interview. I can choose to open a conversation to see if I didn't understand something correctly. What else? I can tell you I need 5 minutes to digest this. So then you start having all these options of how to go about life. And then the next thing that you realize is that when you start choosing a different way to respond, then life in turns chooses a different way to respond as well. So yeah, you go from being a puppet in which you trigger me, and then I do this, and then this happens. Pretty much a sequence of events in which you have nothing to do with to hold on. I'm going to choose how I'm going to respond. This is on me. And the more conscious I am with my choices, the more that's going to be reflected by the outside world as well. Our inner thoughts, whether it's inner self-esteem or the way that we see ourselves in the world changes from us being a victim, a puppet that life is playing with and we are helpless to hold on. No, what I do matters. This is a word that we use in the system, in the Asian system. You start saying more yourself as a creator.
Yes.
Because when you have this belief that what I do matters, and this is something that people are very helpless because they've lost all hope and they feel like, why would I study, or why would I work harder? Why would I put more effort if nothing really matters, if the system's like this, or if this is rigged or something? So you go from, why would I put the effort if nothing really matters, to, hold on, it really matters how I respond to life. And it matters so much that I I can create the life when you, as you start having little examples of how it can work on a small scale. Let's say that I feel insulted, but I tell you, okay, let's talk this again. And then we have a polite conversation. Now I realize that these things that's happening now, it's not like what happened a month ago when I argued with my friend and we never talked again. No, it looks like now we're building our friendship. So when you start seeing in little samples that how you respond matters, then I think you also start expanding the possibility that it can matter in a bigger and bigger realm of things, in a bigger and bigger longer term. And in things that you still don't see yourself as a creator, you think, well, maybe there's still something for me that I haven't seen, because you start living in a world of, let's say, of possibility that maybe because you don't understand something yet, it doesn't mean that it's a certain way. Maybe it's not. And you live with more openness. I think people love to fight for what they believe. And one of the things that I'm appreciating more and more is, instead of fighting harder for what you believe, how about fighting a little less for what you believe? And I think we will all be so much better off.
My friend Gary, I did a interview with him, Gary Cox, on one of the previous shows, and he talks about having stuff stuck in your emotional hard drive. And, having to go in there and like break those habits, remove those things that are stuck in there. So you're actually in the here and now, responding to what's really going on and choosing, rather than being like, if you're somebody who, when you were growing up, you found the world to be untrustworthy, and you couldn't trust people, and you couldn't trust institutions, because somehow you felt you got taken advantage of, you were hurt in some way. So then you go into business and you want to micromanage everything, and you have to control everything. And what a terrible way that is to work and to be, that you can't trust anybody. And if you don't go back inside in the past and, get rid of that and realize that, you have to trust, and you have to start practicing trust, then you never change that cycle, right? And when you start changing that cycle, then new information comes, right? So where the focus goes, the energy flows, right? So if I'm focusing on, I'm losing, this is a terrible day, things are not going my way, I feel like a victim, and this is what your mindset is, and this is what you're thinking about and how you're acting, then naturally, those other things are not going to come to you, right? If you think about it on a very simple level, if I'm aggravated and frustrated, people probably don't want to talk to me, right? Yeah. I don't want to, when I talk to people and they're frustrated and aggravated, I don't really want to communicate with them, because they're going to just keep telling me about what's frustrating and aggravating and what they don't like. And
I will add, so as you imagine that you are frustrated and then people don't want to talk to you, so that you think, then you start blaming them because they don't want to talk to you. They are like this, they are like that. So everybody is the problem, instead of taking a look at, hold on, how am I creating the situation? And this is a question from the system that I love, which is, where am I in all this? Because if you don't ask yourself, in what way may you be contributing to this situation, and you take yourself completely out of the equation, then it looks like what you're doing is irrelevant. And then again, we're going back from the victim. The more that you start to see how what you do matters, how you feel, how you talk, what you believe, whatever you do matters and has consequences, then the more open you're going to be to change. But of course, it's always easier, or a first impulse, because it's hurtful to think, that this happened because I did something wrong, or this happened because whatever. Because I did something wrong. It's always easier. I guess the job of our minds is to protect us and blame everybody in the world, rather than taking a look inside and see, I'm hurt here. When this person does this, then I feel sad. Instead of feeling, and that's how, going back to the example, instead of going back to what part in your body is feeling that, connecting and embracing it, and that's how you dissolve it. Well, that takes work, that takes energy, and it's not pleasant. It's easier to just blame the world around you and continue creating chaos, instead of going inside, dissolving the pain, the emotion, and being free of it.
And it's actually, I also wanted to mention that actually the whole process that you're talking about is actually rather scientific as well. The parts of your brain that you're triggering when you're feeling victimization, when you're feeling nothing's going your way, when you're feeling defeated and victimized, the parts of your brain that you're triggering is the survival mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like fight or flight type of mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you are calm and you're relaxed and you realize like, okay, what can I learn from this and how can I change and maybe change directions and pivot or whatever, then you start to open up the other part of your brain, which is the creative thinking, which is, what we want to be. And we want to be in that creative space to have creative problem solving, for example, right? And you can't do that when you're in the other way. So like doing this scientifically opens you up so that you can use those skill sets of creative problem solving. So it's pretty good stuff.
I like to hear this when science catches up with I guess with this more inner ways of operating.
Because really there is a mind body connection. We cannot deny that there's a mind body connection. On a very simple level, when they give a control group a sugar pill, and they give the other part of the group the actual medication, a large percentage, like 80% of the people who take the sugar pill say that they had relief from their symptoms, even though they just took a pill of sugar, right? So there is a definite mind-body connection, and we can't deny that, and science can't deny that anymore.
Yeah, 100%. And before when you were sharing about your friend, I think who was telling you or explaining you how things that happened in our past. I want to give you an example. So in this retreat that I did for 6 months, it was 150 of us. It was in Uruguay. Most students were from Latin America. A bunch of us from Spain, a couple from North America. But there's one story that I will always remember. There was one student around 65 from Spain. I think it was towards the last weeks of the retreat, that he remembered how, he was still 65. He was big and he was tall, he was big. And when he was 17, someone told him that he was only going to be useful to download trucks. Someone told him when he was 17 that this kid is only going to be useful to download trucks. He lived his whole life thinking that he was only going to be useful to download trucks. What are the implications? So why study if I'm not smart enough? All these insecurities that can bring you, how it limits your life because of a lack of confidence in yourself. And it's very clear with him, but I think in a different flavor, in a different intensity, we all have some of this. And it will be very beneficial for us to see them, dissolve them, let them go, and be as free as possible. To not live a life. Imagine that 40 years later you're making a choice that's not the best choice for you because someone told you something 40 years ago. It sounds so crazy, but we can't really understand how. I think that's how marked we can be by these childhood stories. We are so influenced, let's use that word, by things that maybe someone said about that without not knowing anything, maybe suddenly, maybe bad intentions. But when we're kids, we're sponges, and we end up believing things that are not good for us. It just happens. We don't judge.
And then we start saying it to ourselves, and then we tell ourselves these things.
But we believe it.
That's why I always I'm a real proponent of having a support group of people in your life that, they're maybe movers and shakers. They're doing things. They're making things happen in your life. You look up to them. They're in your life as your support structure. And you believe that when you share with them, they care for your well-being and they want to see you do the best that you can be and be the best you can be. They're not trying to hurt you. So you can bounce things off to them to find out, what's really true or not true. Like, for example, this is just silly, but I have believed certain things in my life and did not move in certain directions because I really believed for some reason I couldn't do that. There was some block, right? And then I would share that with somebody who was like my mentor who I trusted, and he would tell me, why do you think that way? And how is that true? And is it possible to be something? I said, well, yeah, it's possible. Well, then if it's possible, then that means you could do it. Right. And like my whole world opened up for this one 5-minute conversation with somebody. This world opened up for me. So it's an important part. But ever since I was young, I don't really know why exactly, and it doesn't matter. But ever since I was young, I've always gravitated towards these stories of people being able to do some extraordinary things, people being able to change, and people who through adversity learned so many things and had a much richer and better life after the adversity than before. When you were talking about the gentleman who, was told that he'd only be good for some physical labor type of job, I remember there was a story I read when I was about 13 that the man was a janitor and he had just lived his life and thought that being a janitor was the best he can do. He lived in the basement of the building. And one day, for some strange reason, he took a IQ test. And when he did the IQ test, he found out that he was a genius, that he had genius IQ score. And suddenly he changed his whole perspective about who he was and what was possible and potential for his life. And he left that job and he went on to do great things in his life. And so it is really important that we really look at ourselves. We really realize that the person that really is holding us back is not other people, places, and things, but it's ourselves. It's really ourselves.
If we are being so influenced by, let's call them permission slips from the outside, it's almost like this guy that you were sharing, this janitor, like the test was his permission slip to think higher about himself and live a different life. We are so trapped by all these things that we believed, and it could very well be that someone could have given him a false test with false results and told him, you are so smart, and maybe he wasn't, but just the fact that he was believing it could change his life. We end up believing all these things and living our life as if these things were true. It's crazy.
When I did the stem cell treatments to my knees, the doctor asked me, do you believe this is going to work? And I said, yeah, I believe it. He goes, well, then it's going to work. If you believe it, it's going to work. So just keep believing it. So belief is so powerful.
Yeah, but the thing we believe is that sometimes we need to really believe, because with our mouths, we can say a lot of things, but there has to be an inner conviction, I think. We go to Joe Dispenza too much, so I don't want to explain science that I don't really understand, but it looks like with our words, we have this electric impulse, but with our heart, we have the magnetic impulse. So when both match, that's when it becomes more powerful. That's to say that all these affirmations people can say, I don't know, I'm really rich, I'm really happy, I'm really smart. But it could just be a mouth talking that's disconnected from your whole body. When you're really connected, that's when I think it's powerful. When you're really embodying, because that means you're already believing what you're saying, you're really believing it, and you're resonating, and that vibration is being expressed in the world.
When it's all congruent, right? When you think it, feel it, say it, and act that way. Right? When you're doing things, are you acting like that? Is this the way somebody acts who believes those things? Or am I acting like somebody who doesn't believe those things, right? When all of that stuff's congruent, that's when it happens. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Let's change gears for a second, because I want to also talk a little bit about, you have gone through some great challenges in your life as well. And I know at one time a doctor told you that you were going to be a paraplegic. Can we talk a little bit about that and how that went?
So, picture a 24-year-old. Have you heard of the full moon party in Koh Phangan? Well, there's an island in Thailand that's famous for the full moon party. I was there many years ago. I was there for New Year's. I spent the whole night dancing, and then I was living in Indonesia at the time. I went back to Indonesia a few days later, and my right ankle, the ankle started hurting. And then I started physical therapy, and instead of getting better, my left ankle started hurting. And then my shoulders, my neck, my back, my whole body started being very painful. I had so much sensitivity in my wrists that I couldn't even fold a glass or open the doors. And at that point, it's clear that you think, well, it's not just my wrists or my ankles or my neck. It looks like there's something going on in my whole system. I was clueless. I was confused. Again, this is me in Indonesia. And I went to a hospital. Yeah, I went to a hospital and they did an x-ray. And I was told that I had a spur. I'm not sure. This is a spur in my vertebrae that was going to pinch my
spinal cord.
Exactly, my spinal cord.
Yeah.
And it was pointing and it was going to pinch it and it was going to leave me paraplegic. So I called my parents. My dad, he's a retired doctor. He was a doctor then. And I remember I called my parents. I told them, I need you guys to sit down. I've never been so dramatic in my life. I told them, I need you guys to sit. I'm going to tell you something. I need you to sit down. And I remember my dad told me, okay, go on. Come on. What's happening? And I told him, doctor saw my x-ray. They saw that I have a spore in my vertebrae that's going to affect my, how do you call it? My
spinal cord.
My spinal cord. I'm going to become paraplegic. I said, I have bad news. The doctor has told me that I have this spur that's going to make me paraplegic. And my dad told me, and this is something that I will always remember, that is not bad news. That is false news. And it ended up becoming false news. I took a break for a couple of weeks. I went to Spain. I got all these tests. The doctors really never found an answer. They gave me the last day before going back to Indonesia, or the last day, I was diagnosed rheumatoid arthritis. And this is when I had to make I think it was the hardest choice of my life. Again, I'm 24. I'm depressed for the first time. I feel like something is really, really wrong with my body, and I don't know what it is. And then, and that's it. I like to point out the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is a physical sensation of discomfort. It doesn't feel good. And suffering is the stories in our head that we tell us about the situation. I'm never going to be able to walk again, sleep again, be happy again. I don't know what to do with my life. I'm so lost. I'm so confused. There's no responses. So, because for the 2 weeks that I was doing the test, sometimes I was so desperate that I was hoping that something would come up, like this is what you have. My feeling was I really want that they finally figure out what I had, and as results were coming, let's say, the results were telling me that I was fine, it was just making me feel worse because it made me more helpless. Nobody, like I feel like this, nobody tell me it's just that I'm hallucinating because the tests cannot show it. I'm really feeling this pain, whether you can explain it or not. I'm feeling this pain and this sensitivity. So again, that was. So I think that was the first time in my life that I really suffered. That I was depressed, and I remember I had to make a choice. Do I go back to Indonesia, continue to the job that I have, or even though the last thing in my life that I want is to get in a plane, go to thousands of miles away with a suitcase full of drugs that I don't know what's going to happen, or stay at home. But stay at home doing what? Just pretty much saying goodbye to the life that I already have. I ended up going back to Indonesia and to evolve the story a little bit. A few weeks later, I was on a plane to Bali, from Jakarta to Bali. I sat next to a chiropractor. I told him what was happening. He told me he could help me. He didn't help too much, but it opened. This was my first encounter with alternative medicine. And then after Indonesia, I went to live to Miami. And on my flight from Madrid to Miami, I sat next to another chiropractor. Yes. And he told me you should call this person in Miami. I called him. His name was Joao Curso. He had won the best chiropractor, I think, in Miami or Florida a few years earlier. He wasn't in this office, but his son, who was also sharing the office with him, took the call, and he told me he did a different kind of chiropractic, which is called network spinal analysis, which is not so much about moving bones, but releasing the tension in the spinal cord with very light touches. And that was the beginning of, for me, of my spiritual journey in a very short story. And it was, we were talking about this, most, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, most people in Spain or the Western world, like my brothers, they will have no interest in this. Only because I went through this helplessness and I looked for answers, that I ended up in this path. Otherwise, I would have just lived my normal life. So you never know. You never know what's going to come out from these things, and that completely changed my life.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I like how that, then started you on your spiritual journey. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked a lot about your book and the stories in your book, and I'm going to drop in the notes so people can get a copy of your book and put the information so they can go to your website. Is there anything else, though, that we haven't discussed that you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Well, I think is to do a little, since we've talked about all these things, emotions, spirituality. Yeah, I'd like to talk about the human aspect of being a founder, going back to the beginning. I think people that are very in love with what they do, very committed, call it maybe also artists or sports players, people whose work is very out there for everybody to see, judge, talk about. I think that's an extra pressure unnecessary of image. I think that's the component of image, and we end up doing things not because they resonate with our heart, also, but because we feel we have to do them. We want to be perceived in a certain way. So the message is that the same way that it takes a lot of honesty and effort to start a project like starting a company, it also takes a lot of honesty to reassess what's working, what's not working, and what do I really want to do with my life. And I would hope that if you're a founder, you can see beyond your company. Yeah, maybe this company did not work, but maybe you learn so much more than the next one will, or you made a connection that would complement you in the next one. We just really don't know what's going to happen, but let's open up and let's trust that if we trust, we will end up arriving at a place that we didn't know existed before, and it may even be more magical and beautiful than what we thought at the beginning.
I appreciated our time together, and that last part there, that's a worthwhile endeavor for sure, to keep going and see what the universe has in store for us and be open to what that might be beyond our wildest dreams, right?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Eddie, for having me, for listening, for engaging with me.
I'll be in touch. I want to talk more.
Sure, well, let's do it. I look forward to that, and I want to hear more about everything you're doing.
Thank you, my friend.
Yeah. Okay, all the best, Eddie. Thank you.
All right, you too. For more information and monthly topics of interest, please go to transformyourfuture.com and join the newsletter.